Hey there, What's Next ATL listeners. We hope you're enjoying the show. If you are, do us a favor and head to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating and review. And when you do that, take a screenshot and send it to us for a chance to win a What's Next ATL t-shirt. It's gray, it's really soft, and it has the What's Next ATL logo on the back. It's a really cool shirt. Everyone in the building is trying to steal them from us, but you can come by yours honestly. Again, review, screenshot, and email that to info@whatsnextatl.org. Thanks. Welcome to What's Next ATL, powered by the Atlanta Regional Commission, where we explore the big new ideas shaping Metro Atlanta. I'm Kate Sweeney. Today, we're talking about paying rent when you're older, what people struggle with, and we'll look at one creative solution. It's a story about Beth Hogan and her roommate, Debbie Aschemeier.
I have more money, and I like that.
More money's always
Yes.
good. You can give it to me, Debbie.
She's funny.
Beth and Debbie are in their early 60s. Beth's from Ohio. Debbie's moved around a lot. They're both divorced and both have had long careers in the medical field. They both love gardening, shopping for good deals, and now they're roommates. 21st century Golden Girls.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is...
In Debbie's case, she likes that renting a room in Beth's house has saved her money, as you heard her say, while enabling her to downsize.
I kept the basic things, you know. I've got a nice little bedroom in there, and I've got my window, and I've got my computer, and I've got my rocking chair, and
You
for me,
do
it's
eat
ideal.
a lot of my food, though, that I make.
Well, that you make, yes. She's a good cook, but smarty.
When I interviewed Beth and Debbie, they were looking for a third roommate, and possibly even a fourth down the road. And they're not alone. Today, so-called Golden Girls housing has become a real trend. Mostly women moving in together to save money and build community along the way. Now, you may be listening and be like, the Golden Girls, that was a hilarious TV show back in the day, but what does it have to do with me? Well, here's the thing. None of us, whether we're in our 30s, 40s, or 70s, like to think of ourselves as old. But we all want to live long lives. And we are. Statistically, we're living longer lives than we've ever lived. Now we just need to plan for it, especially as the population of people over 65 is skyrocketing. Here in Metro Atlanta, it's set to double by 2040. So we've got a lot of older people, many of them women. We're expecting more, including possibly, dear listener, you and me. And to add to all that, we've got a housing affordability problem. More than half of all Metro Atlantans aged 65 or older spend more than 30% of their income on housing, which doesn't leave much for expenses like transportation, which can be expensive here in Metro Atlanta, or medical care, which often becomes more of a thing when you're an older person like Beth Hogan.
I've been in and out of the job market because of some health issues. So right now I'm out on a leave of absence and back on Social Security disability. So because of that, to stay in this home and keep everything paid, 2 roommates are necessary for me.
It's panning out. The rent money Beth collects pays all but $150 of her monthly living expenses. So now she has money for extra things, like fixing up the kitchen and installing a sun porch. Instead of spending these years worrying about money, she's having fun in her house and enjoying life with Debbie, which brings up a perk neither of them expected when they started out: friendship.
We found out really just last week. Debbie and I are the same Myers-Briggs personality types.
The Myers-Briggs, that's that test you might have seen that determines if you're an introvert or an extrovert, thinking or feeling, stuff like that, and sums it up in 4 letters.
Which is why
We
I
get
told
along
her
so
we
well.
get along so well.
Right off the bat.
From the day I first met her, we just hit it off, and I don't think we've ever had a disagreement,
No.
have we?
No.
and we just get along. We have the same kind of tastes and beliefs and blah, blah, blah.
And when she wasn't home, when I thought she should have been home, Beth, where you at? Is everything okay?
Yeah.
And she still likes to date, so.
Yeah, she's got to watch out for me.
They didn't go into this experience expecting to get close, but now these two extroverted homebodies go out to eat together. They take Debbie's big pickup truck to buy plants for the garden.
Yeah, we went shopping over at Pike's Nursery. Oh my God, we had so much fun. Lilac bushes and rose bushes and flowers. And
Yeah.
so
She's
where do they
helping
go?
me.
In the truck.
Yeah.
And they've got big plans.
Long-term goal would be to add a garden for us to get fresh vegetables and fruits, add berry bushes and fruit trees and what have you, and then maybe set up a food co-op among us all.
It sounds like this is turning into almost like a community building exercise for you. Is that accurate to say?
It is. I'd like to put together a plan and a design for a Golden Girls, Golden Guys shared housing model that would have around 12 people in the community.
They even have a name for that community. It's the same name they've given this house, the Hummingbird House, because of Beth's decor.
And you can see there's lots of
Yeah, they're
hummingbirds
on the
all over the
lamps,
place.
they're
Everybody
everywhere.
teases me about it.
Beth jokingly calls the Hummingbird House an old person's commune, and it's her dream. But to make it a reality, there are some long-term plans to think about, like housemates' responsibilities toward one another in the case of health concerns, and all the legal matters that come with home ownership in those cases. Beth and Debbie are working through all of that with one goal in mind.
I would like to live here with roommates for as long as I can.
There are advantages to this lifestyle that they're not about to give up. Here's Debbie.
I've never wanted to own property. I was an Air Force brat. I married into it. I've lived all over the United States, been in every state of the union except for Alaska and Hawaii more than one time. And I just don't want the burden, I call it, of owning something. So this is good for me.
And for me, as far as not living with a romantic partner, it's very freeing because you don't have someone like Debbie mentioned that expects you to do things or spend time with them or whatever. And I think that's a whole lot different than having a romantic partner that you have to worry about spending time with and getting along with and
neglecting
accepting
them
their
and
idiosyncrasies and things like that.
As for each other's idiosyncrasies, they've accepted those just fine. In fact, the single biggest piece of advice that they'd give to other people considering becoming roommates: make sure you get along.
We just got lucky, or I got lucky with her, put it that way, because I'm anal about some things.
Really?
Yeah,
I
you
never
figure it-
noticed.
Well, no, you never noticed because you and I are the same kind of person in a lot of ways.
That's Beth Hogan and her roommate, Debbie Aschemeier, both of whom plan to stay in the Hummingbird House for as long as possible. So Beth and Debbie, they're loving their co-housing situation. It works for them. And it turns out allowing for a variety of affordable housing options for older adults actually benefits all of us in some pretty fascinating ways. More on that in a moment. Hey there. Last episode, we talked about Metro Atlanta's housing affordability issue, and we asked you, do you pay more than 30% of your income on rent or mortgage? Remember, housing is considered affordable if a household spends less than that on housing costs. But in your response to our listener poll, 59% of you said you pay more than 30% of your income on rent or mortgage. And while our listener poll is not scientific, in this case, it reflects something similar to the reality of life in Metro Atlanta, where most neighborhoods are not affordable to half the region's workers. We also got some listener comments, including Netta, the landlord you heard from who finds herself raising her rent even though she really doesn't want to.
This will be the last year I'll be able to keep my rents low, and I'm pretty bummed out about it.
Netta wrote back to make it clear that rising property taxes in her county are the reason she needs to raise those rents. There is reason to hope. Last episode, we talked with 2 elected officials working to turn the tide. And the ARC, the group that puts out this podcast, is partnering with organizations across a number of sectors to develop a regional housing strategy in effort to help local governments better understand their housing challenges and begin to address them. This week, we have a new question for you. You've met Beth Hogan and Debbie Aschemeier in their hummingbird house. Now tell us, would you consider spending your older years sharing living space with a group of other people? Let us know on the page for this episode at whatsnextatl.org. We'll share the results next time. We're back. This week on What's Next ATL, we're looking at the so-called Golden Girls housing trend, older people saving money and building community by choosing to live together. The trend comes as a reaction to a number of things, the rising issue of housing affordability for one, and there are other factors at play too. For a look at some of those factors, I talked with Catherine Lawler. She's the executive director for the Atlanta Regional Collaborative for Health Improvement. She's dedicated much of her career to addressing housing and community challenges for the rapidly growing older adult population.
Yes, this has been an issue that I have had the opportunity to look at in Atlanta, but also look at across the country. Mm-hmm.
So Beth and Debbie, whom we just heard from, took this problem of housing affordability, got creative, and became roommates. And I understand this is kind of a trend.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly exciting. We have a generation who is moving into this phase of life who is looking around saying, maybe everything that's available isn't enough for me. Maybe I need other options. And you see in that example that spirit of taking control and sort of saying there's another option and I'm going to make it for myself. Because we are in this time of radical reinvention. Aging is a really brand new idea. And we have to make space for those new ideas to emerge.
I mean, this is the boomer generation we're talking about, right? It's this generation known for feats of reinvention, whether that was through rock music and pop culture or like the classic civil rights movement. And in this case, I mean, we're looking at reinventing what community looks like in older age. This idea of it maybe not being in an assisted living facility, but instead among friends.
People who are in their 60s now are very likely those people who moved here in their 20s when they got a new job, and they were a part of building their community. And that continued voice, those continued ideas, that energy and spirit that they brought in those previous decades can be something that can power our future, as long as we make the space and make sure there aren't any rules holding them back.
Beth Hogan, whom I interviewed, is such a powerhouse. She is absolutely exemplary of what you're talking about in terms of she has this idea for having almost a co-housing situation in which it's a number of older individuals. She called them golden girls and golden guys under her roof, living together and, really supporting one another, cooking meals together. And I understand that in Metro Atlanta and many other places as well, a lot of communities actually have regulations that might prevent that from happening.
Right. So communities probably never even thinking about the models that she's championing. They have rules that say that about how many unrelated people can live in a single house. They might have rules that talk about how many cars can be parked.
As for why communities would have rules like this, limiting the number of unrelated people who can live in a house, well, they may have been put in place for many reasons, ranging from genuine public health concerns to neighborhood preservation. No matter why they're there, Catherine Lawler says they get in the way of arrangements like this.
And so if we imagine 5 great dear friends figuring out a way that they want to live together, that maybe as they get older they have one person who provides each of them with a little bit of support, getting dressed or bathing or with the grocery shopping. All of this is a fabulous idea, but suddenly it runs into sort of the unintended consequence that in some places it might actually be against the rules. And it's worth a re-examination because, again, this is a brand new thing.
Catherine, at the end of the day, what makes this more than a niche issue? Like, why should it matter to me if I'm, say, a 25-year-old who's just moved to Metro Atlanta because she's just gotten a great tech job, say?
It's an interesting question. Aging is something that no one is exempt from. You and I will be older when we're done our conversation today, and everyone who listens to this will be older when it's over. It is something that is happening real time and live. And so if we make some plans now, it's possible for all of those new decades to be ones that we embrace fully and not dread or aren't scared about, or we find ourselves always having to make jokes about growing older. Why can't it be actually that it keeps getting better and better? But it takes investment and thoughtfulness.
Okay, so aging is entering a territory we've never known before. Our lives are growing longer and longer. And, says Catherine Mahler, this time marks a frontier, a time to innovate the ways we build our communities around this change. And there's a lot more to building our communities so that they really work for every age and ability level. You can find out more about these issues on the page for this episode at whatsnextatl.org. There, you can also find photos of Beth and Debbie in their hummingbird house. And if this episode has gotten you thinking of starting your own co-housing adventure at any age, you can find resources and other stories about that too. Next week is Thanksgiving, so we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next episode. That's when we answer the question, why should driverless cars and so-called connected technologies interest any but the tech nerdiest among us? Well, it turns out that there's actually a lot at stake for everyone.
Even before we talk about the driverless cars or the flying cars or the connected vehicle, I think it's important to think about, do you have a choice?
That's next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey everyone, I'm Danny Fernandez.
I'm Iffy Wadaway.
And we're the hosts of
Nerdificent.
And we cover all types of nerdy fandoms, tech. Iffy, what are some of your favorite episodes that we've done?
Oh man, we had the VR episodes, violence in video games, MCU. Didn't we also talk about fan films?
Yeah, we talked about fan films. We've also talked about the history of esports and where it's going, as well as some of the controversies in it.
Dang, so where can people find it if they are interested of these things we just talked about?
They can catch us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to look up Nerdificent.